Right, we are in session and I can see all the numbers ticking up. It's really great to see. Wow. So first and foremost, a huge welcome to everyone who's dialing in to today's session. We're really excited for this one. We are joined by some fabulous staffers from Penguin Random House. And today's session is going to be a slightly different one, but it's all in keeping with Work in Publishing Week. It's going to be about leveling up your knowledge on a specific and vital tool within every publisher's toolkit, which is Biblio. So we're going to be taking a bit of a deep dive into it, and we'll also hear about like some practical applications of the tool as well. It's structured so that it's a bit of a learning experience. So we won't have a specific dedicated section for question and answers, but the Q&A function is available. So if folks do have really burning questions that we don't cover, feel free to save them once we have the demo, and then we might address them in the latter portion of the training session. But that's fabulous. I can just see the numbers ticking up and up and up. That's brilliant to see. Brief intro on who we have on our panel for this afternoon session. So I'm Ella Darlington from Creative Access. I'm the head of comms there. And if you weren't already aware of who Creative Access are, or you're unfamiliar, we're a social enterprise that's all about making the creative industries more representative of what the UK looks like today. So that means working with lots of talented individuals and employers like Penguin Random House to offer career inspiration, opportunities, and training at all points of your career. So if you're not already, make sure that you're following us on social media, and as well as Penguin Random House. And also making sure that you're registered with us is also the fastest way to make sure that you don't miss out on any of the valuable updates or new role opportunities, as you'll get weekly notifications in your inbox. And you can register with us by heading to our website and heading to the top navigation and register. So without further ado, let's meet our panel. And we're joined by some wonderful people. First up, we've got Patrick Attier, who's a digital technology trainer. We've got Julia Robson, who's senior inventory manager. We've got Tanzim Kamali, who's production controller. And we've got Emily Large, who's programs and outreach. Did we all just want to go around and just like give people a little bit of a sense of what it is that you do in your role? Patrick, if you wanted to start.
Yeah, hi everyone, good afternoon and welcome. My name is Patrick Attier. I am a trainer within the technology team within Penguin Random House. I've been with Penguin for 2 years now. And what it does is it combines my love of technology with trying to demystify software. And that's everything from document management software to Microsoft Office products to, of course, Biblio, which is what we're going to be talking about today.
Awesome. Tanzim, tell us a bit about you and what you do.
Hello everyone, my name's Tanzim. I'm a production controller for the children's team. I work across all of the children's books, from novelty titles all the way up to YA, stuff on mono, stuff on color. I'm in production, so I'm dealing with all the physical aspects of the book, but it all also goes through Biblio as well. So I'll be talking through that.
Brilliant. Julia, do you want to give us a sense of what you do?
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm a senior inventory manager. I've been at PRH for just over 20 years. And I work in a team of about 10 of us within the various different divisions. So I work in the press division on lots of hardback classics and work closely with the US with lots of non-fiction books. And essentially we sit in a little hub in the middle of the business dealing with the supply chain and operations and logistics.
Brilliant. So if you're not doing doing what you need to do, everything else falls apart, basically.
Absolutely.
And Emily, tell us about what you do as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Emily. I won't be speaking in the sort of Biblio side of things today, but I work on our programs and outreach here at Penguin. So I've been working closely with Ella on sort of setting up this session, which has been really fun to work on, and can't wait to see what everyone's got to say.
Fabulous. Well, all that remains is for us to kick straight off into the Biblio demo. So Patrick, do you want to share with us some visuals While Patrick's doing that, I do want to just remind everyone that if you want to activate captions, you can do that by hitting the 3 dots with more and hitting captions in case that you would like that to be open to you. And in terms of pronouns, mine are she, her, Tanzim and Julia and Emily are also she, her, and Patrick is he, him. So let's kick off.
Brilliant. Can everybody see, or can you see my screen? Just want to confirm.
Yep.
Fantastic. Okay, so welcome everybody. Like I said, I work within the training team at Penguin Random House. And one of the many different bits of software that I run, one of them is Biblio, which is what we're going to talk about here today. And let me focus on that for about 20 minutes or so. So what is Biblio? You may have heard of it, and that might be why you're on the course, or it may be something completely new to you. But Biblio manages the complete publishing process, and it goes from of a work, from the pre-acquisition side all the way through to publication. This means that the life of the title begins within Biblio, and the data is continually updated by various teams, whether that is by editorial or production, marketing, contract, rights and royalties. In fact, you can see them all on there, on the slide. Some of the activities that you can do within Biblio, and unfortunately we're not going to be able to cover them all today, but some of the different things that you can do is you can use it to estimate the costs of producing a book. We allocate the ISBNs within Biblio. We capture all of the editorial, sales, and marketing information. It also holds contractual information, and it's used to set up royalties within that. And it holds all kinds of relevant information about a work, also about people and about organizations, as well as images and digital files as well. So it contains lots of information in there. What I'm going to do for the purposes of my section here is I'm going to show you some screenshots of Biblio. So we've created a slide deck. It's got some screenshots, and I'm going to take you through some of the things that you can see in Biblio and talk through them so that it gives you an understanding of some of the functionality. So that is the plan of what I'm going to do, if that's okay. And I guess the first thing is, what does it look like? So for those of you that haven't seen it before, this is what Biblio looks like when you log into it. It's made up of a main dashboard, which is this central area where my mouse is moving on the screen, which changes to reflect what you're looking at, as well as modules down the left-hand side. Some of those, I know it might be quite small over the screenshot, but some of those include works, so that's information held about the title, contacts, digital asset management, that's where we upload and store all of our digital assets, as well as, in this case, groups, which is the final one I got on there. But what you can see on screen in the main area of the screen here are panels showing me recent works, for example, that I have looked at, or recent contacts. And we're going to explore some of those as we go through the session this morning. Now, the way that I would normally work is I might pick one of those, but if I'm searching for something, there's all kinds of different search functionality as well. And this is an example of a search screen. And if you look at that, so this is an example of a search screen for a work, a title, a book. And you can see that there are over a dozen different fields in there to search. And the idea being that you fill in as little or as much information as you need to be able to get to a particular work. And the example one I've chosen for us today is called World of Jeeves by P.G. Wodehouse. So let's have a brief look at what's going on screen. On the left-hand side, the menu, the main Navy menu, has changed, and it's showing me what screen I'm looking at. It's showing me that we're looking at that general screen. So this is where it contains general information, for example, about the work that I'm looking at. Biblio is actually quite heavily locked down. So what Tanzim can see, or what Julia can see, or what I can see will depend on our permissions, and each of us will be able to do slightly different things within Biblio. So Biblio is fairly locked down in terms of being able to edit things. If we take it a little bit further, a work, which is the overall name of, for example, the book, might be made up of multiple editions. If we look at the screen here, you can see that there's a paperback, there's an ebook, and also it's been reissued. And what I could do is, when you're working within Biblio, you can click onto any of those editions to go directly to them. Other screens that you might be interested in seeing are the roles. So it gives you Biblio holds role information so that you can see who to get in touch with around the firm, which is extremely useful. And it also contains keywords. I'll just briefly mention keywords to you. This is another project that I've been working on that feeds into Biblio. But metadata, when you are searching for a book, for example, on Waterstones or Amazon, if you're not quite sure what to search for, there is metadata. There are these keywords that appear behind the scenes to help make your titles be more discoverable. And you can see some of those related to this title that help make World of Jeeves a little bit more discoverable. That was the overall work. But if you have a look at a particular edition, then you get slightly more information related to that. So this screen, if you have a look at my menu item here, you'll see that I'm no longer looking at a work, but I'm looking at an edition, and this is the general screen. And what I've selected for us to look at here today is the paperback, so P for paperback. So we can see some specific information about it. And in the panel on the right, that has changed to reflect what we're looking at. And you can also see, for example, the jacket image. You don't always get to see jacket covers. Sometimes books, particularly at the early pre-production stage, once we acquire a title, might just be a placeholder and there might not be an image on there. This one, if you have a look at it, we can see that it was when it was published. So this edition was published in November, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and you can see the jacket cover related to it. And there are all kinds of really great screens available. Another thing that you might hear about when working in Biblio is something known as the title information sheet. The title information sheet, also sometimes known as the advanced information sheet, is a one-page summary of your book, which contains key information, which is used sometimes internally, but it's also used externally as well when sending books out. And if you have a look at this, what it's saying is we've got the title and the author, but we've got some key quotes and some sales pitches to help our books to really summarize what's going on. So I've got a sales pitch, talking about the book, there's some quotes on there. And although it's a bit small to read on screen, down here at the bottom right-hand side, information that a bookseller might need. For example, whether it's hardback or paperback, how many pages it is, the cost of the book, and some other codes related to it as well. So lots of really good things on what is known as the advanced information sheet. I'm going to put works to the side. There's plenty more I could talk about, but obviously we are, I just want to give you some key information. We've looked at works. There's also contact information. So I'm going to stick with P.G. Woodhouse, the author of the book that I just put up on screen. If you have a look at my right-hand menu, it's changed. So I'm now looking at what is known as the contacts module. And the contacts module is quite interesting. The contacts module can contain organizations. So it might be sales organizations, it might be agencies, rights organizations, all kinds of different organizations. It doesn't just have to be a person, but it could be a person. It can be an author, a translator, an illustrator. So Biblio really contains a lot of great a lot of good information in there. And again, it's locked down in terms of what you can see. This screen here, also within the contacts module, relates to roles. And so from here, for example, again with PG Woodhouse, you can see all of the different books, all of the different titles that we have logged against his name within Biblio. And what I could do, if we were working within Biblio rather than looking at screenshots, is actually go directly to one of those to get a little bit more information about it. Earlier on, I mentioned jacket covers and images, and Biblio has a module which is known as Digital Asset Management, or DAM for short. And it contains all of the different assets related to a title, to a book. So that can be anything. It doesn't just have to be jacket covers, but it could be ebook files, it can be artwork, it can be print PDFs, and those get uploaded into Biblio. And once they've been uploaded, they can be used for marketing purposes, they can be downloaded by anyone who has access to it, to be able to be used both internally and externally. So there's a lot of great stuff in here as well. And this is an example, again with the World of Jeeves, but this is an example of the images screen. If I just want to download the image, what you can see here is all of the different formats that you can download. And you can either look at them by clicking onto the left-hand side, or indeed downloading them by clicking onto the links on the right. But Biblio does a lot more than just that. One of the things that I really like working with in Biblio is groups, because rather than looking title by title, you can actually build a group in which you bundle together lots of different books, so that rather than having to search for each time for the book that you want to update or get information about, you can bundle them together. And this screen, if you have a look at the left-hand menu, we're now looking at the groups module. But what this is, it's a group, it's called November Project. And I've put 16 different editions into them. And it's just slightly easier for me to work with them. So rather than going one by one, I can click directly onto one of the different titles, and it will take me to the works module, but it will be as part of a group. So again, kind of thing that different people might use, and you can use this in editorial, marketing. I use it not just in training, but I use it in my day-to-day job of books that I'm interested in. It allows you to keep your eye on the books to be able to stay on top of what's going on. And you can add books, you can remove books. A good example of this, actually, let me give you an example of when you might want to do this. Suppose, for example, that you work in the publicity team. One of the things you might do is put together a series of books that you're going to be responsible for in the build-up to Christmas. So I wouldn't necessarily call it November Project, but you might be building your group up slightly earlier. And it allows you to stay on top of things. So I might have some Christmas books, not necessarily Christmas books, but books that are coming out in time for Christmas that I might want to put in there, and just track them by looking at the group. And of course, what we're looking at here is how to put information in them and some of the screens. But one of the other things that is extremely useful about Biblio is that within the group, you can look and you can search for your titles this way as well, with the jacket covers. You might not always have a jacket cover if you've built up a group. So if you're working in production, for example, and you've got a group that you're of works that haven't come out yet, some of them might not have the jacket covers assigned, but you can see them in there. The final thing I want to share with you, if I may, is reports, because everything we've looked at is what's in Biblio. What if you want to extract information? And you can do that by running reports. There are, oh, I don't know, one of my colleagues might correct me, but I believe there are over 90 different types of reports that exist that are accessible to you, again, depending on your permissions, from the reports module. And you can see on the left-hand side where my mouse is now in the navy menu, some of the different template categories. What I've actually put up on screen is a really popular report. It's a very useful one. It's called the pub schedule, and it's used across the firm. And it allows you, for example, to have a look at titles that are coming out that we might be publishing. All of the reports allow you to search for something. So you're putting into the filters on the left-hand side what it is you're looking for. And I'm not sure, it might be quite small, but if you have a look at this, what it actually says is titles that are coming out starting the 1st of July and running for the next 3 months. So you're putting in on the left-hand side what you're looking for. On the right-hand side, what you want to know. And then you can click to generate the report. Now, I've got one up on screen. It's even smaller on screen, and I'm well aware of that. But reports, so it doesn't really matter what it's actually showing for the purposes of today. But the idea is that you can generate reports in Excel format or in interactive format, and you can get the information out in a very useful, very quick, actually, user-friendly way. And that's ultimately what Biblio is. Now, I appreciate that I've been talking for approximately 20 minutes, and that's my allotted time. And there's much, much more. But hopefully, what I've done is I've given you a little bit of an overview of some of the functionality, and hopefully you found this quite useful. So thank you all very much, and I will hand over to Julia Robson. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. Hi, everyone. So I just wanted to, now Patrick has shared some of the screens, I just wanted to talk to everyone about what inventory do and how we sit as a business and how we interact with Biblio. So over my time at PRH, inventory has sat under various different teams, but we're now currently under the publishing operations department. And our systems have changed significantly in that time. So when we first started, we used something called Vista and Pisces for our stock and sales inquiries. And now we use SAP and obviously predominantly Biblio. So as Patrick alluded, Biblio is used across the industry, but each publisher very much kind of builds different modules and workflows within their own systems. So for the inventory team, Biblio is a completely invaluable tool and one that we use throughout our day, helping us make the best stock decisions and print decisions and analyze sales patterns and market trends. So we look at the stock demands for the UK market, for the export market, and for group territories. And we action all of our print decisions through Biblio, which I'll come on to a little bit later in the presentation. So to start, I wanted to talk a bit about a day in the life of an inventory manager. So one of the first things we do is use Biblio to run what we call our key titles reports. So this is where we see a whole variety of ISBNs, titles, stock, daily, monthly, life-to-date sales for our biggest titles that are currently being published. And the IM team use that report to evaluate what we call our rate of sale. We look at our reprint lead times. So there's a variety of reprint lead times we see in Biblio. Some of our print schedules are in the UK, so we can get books very fast, and some of our prints are in Europe and the Far East. So obviously that would take more like weeks or months. So it's crucial for us to be able to see all of that data in Biblio so we can make an accurate decision and have a constant flow of stock within our supply chain, but obviously ideally never too much. So we look at the data to respond to market demands from all the different territories. We also use book scan data, in the background to supplement the information that we see on Biblio, to evaluate both frontlist decisions, so that's titles that are not yet published and are recently published, like Patrick mentioned, and backlist print decisions. And we work really closely with many teams through Biblio to look at our demands for paper, for materials, and obviously for the physical books that we need. We focus on various different markets, from Amazon and online, as well as high street wholesalers and non-trade, and we see all of those sales, excuse me, which I'll go on to a bit more. We see all of those sales through Biblio. So there's various different modules that we have, PRH within Biblio, and the inventory module is absolutely invaluable. It isn't when I first joined many years ago, when we first put Biblio in, some publishers have Biblio just for bibliographic information about the ISBN, about the title, about the pub date, but we're really lucky that we have been able to integrate the inventory module into our workflows. That module has 5 different screens. We have an inventory general screen where we can set up all of our alert parameters. So the system, based on some sales and the reprint lead times, can then flag to us when we need to look at reprints. We have stock and sales tables where we see daily, weekly, monthly sales, and where we also see the retail price and the format of these books. We have a stock management screen where we look at if there's any stocks where we have maybe overprinted and we've got too much stock. And then we also manage the status of a title. So if we ever wanted to put something out of print, that's where we would do that. And then finally, we have something called a forecasting tab, where Biblio looks at average and estimated sales. And then we get alerts which come through onto our dashboard. And as Patrick mentioned, we can put those into a group and we can tab through them. And that's how we look to see what we would like to reprint and what we need to look at that day. The Biblio feed we get is overnight. So every 12 hours, we then get an update from our SAP systems as well. So for the stock and sales screen, if I talk a bit about that, this allows us to actually click in. As Patrick was saying, we can actually click into the data, which is invaluable for us. So we can, let's say we sold 1,000 copies in June, and we wanted to go into that and see where that demand is coming from. Biblio is a really brilliant system to be able to just get into the granular details. So we could tab in and we might see that we'd sold 800 copies to Amazon or 800 copies to Waterstones. So that's a really useful. It's much better than our previous systems. So I want to talk a little bit about how we interact with other departments through Biblio. So as I said, the IM team sits within the business, in the middle of the business, in between sales, production, editorial and marketing and distribution. And Biblio allows the company to have one clear data hub for business use. So, for example, the key titles report, which I mentioned earlier for inventory, key stakeholders look at that across the business every morning, and that prompts reprint discussions between inventory and sales and production. So that's crucial for us. There's a lot that we do between inventory and production. So we use workflows within our inventory module where we can we send them across to production to cost and then order books. We use a tool called a cost analysis, where, for example, we would be able to compare the margins and profits on various different print runs. So we might want to look at 1,000 copies compared to 800 copies, or we might want to look at a run at a retail price of $7.99 or $9.99. So we can have a look and see how those different costs compare. The production teams obviously raise some of our orders. So certainly they raise all the front list orders, and we can have a look at the various costs for those at print meetings, or we pull all of that information together through Biblio in the inventory team. So to talk a little bit more about our dashboards and reporting and alerts. So we use many reports every day in Biblio. And as Patrick said, it's a hub of just an incredible amount of information. We can pull reports so we can review series or imprints or certain types of titles. So we might look at a particular author or a particular series or set of titles that have a certain RRP. And then we touched a little bit on the alerts earlier, but basically Biblio allows my team to work by exception. So before Biblio, we had to kind of constantly trawl through lines and lines and lines and thousands of titles to try and catch things that needed printing. But Biblio uses certain key information and data and flags it to us by exception. So we have a dashboard, and then we can put a bunch of titles into a group, and we can work our way through those and have a look at the stock and sales screens. And that's really invaluable when the team has got thousands and thousands of titles to look at. So to talk a little bit about bibliographics, so as I say, B3 is a bibliographic centre of information, and our responsibility in inventory has changed quite a bit. So, for example, we used to move around publication dates and manage some of the bibliographic information. My team is now responsible for changing RRPs, making titles, changing the status, so maybe making a title out of print or changing it to print on demand. So that's kind of changed a little bit over the years. And we work really closely with the bibliographic teams to ensure that we have the most accurate data for internal and external purposes. So to talk a little bit about new titles and backlists. So the production teams maintain schedules around front list titles, and that means that they're not yet published. And then the inventory teams take over the process and collate the titles that need to be signed off by key business contacts. And those decisions, as I say, are made in print meetings, and Biblio is just a really clear, brilliant tool to be able to have conversations and kickstart those discussions about the best print volumes we need to look at. And then for backlist, these processes are very much driven by the inventory team. So we have various different information in Biblio, which we use as our kind of key performance indicators to have a look at margins and stock holdings and stock turn targets. So there's a constant flow of information. The inventory team essentially manages the life cycle of a book. So in Biblio, when a title is first acquired, it's set up on Biblio with all of its bibliographic information, as Patrick showed you. And then essentially inventory takeover, and we print the first printing, we print any reprints that we need to until if sales then decline, then we might make a book out of print. So we're looking at the kind of entire life cycle of it. In terms of how we interact on Biblio between ourselves and production, there's 3 different ways that we can print a book. We can do what we call a manual printing. So we would workflow that print instruction from the inventory teams across to production, and they would raise that with the printer. And then we also have some ways to have kind of sliding costs within and scales within Biblio. So once that's been set up, the inventory team are allowed to do something called standard reprinting. So we actually physically order that book directly with Clays and with the printers. And then we have something which is brand new functionality for Biblio. Actually, we're the first publisher to put this in, and it's something called automated stock replenishment. And this is where there is certain key information and data in Biblio, and it's all set up and maintained by inventory, but the order automatically goes across to the printers. So we've got thousands of titles that happens on, and we are the first publisher to do this. So I've worked on that project for the last couple of years, and that's been brilliant. And finally, one thing we do in B3 is when we have certain territories, so Australia, South Africa and India, where they might have local hubs and printers, where they would then print books locally for their local market, because it's quicker to get there from doing a local print. And we set those PIs up through Biblio also and workflow those across to production. So it's very much a kind of a global print run. And just finally, just to say, I find Biblio, incredibly easy to use, very, very easy to train. new starters on. And I think we're very lucky to have the modules we have in it, and to have, like I say, one big data hub just allows the workflows and processes across the business to be really well aligned and work really well. Okay, I'm now going to hand over to Tanzim.
Hi everyone, hope you're still well and you're enjoying this session. I'm just going to talk a little bit about how production uses Biblio. First, I'll introduce myself. So my name is Tanzim. I'm a production controller for the Puffin children's team at Penguin Random House. I'm currently on a 12-month secondment in this role, but before that I was a production assistant, still in the same team. I graduated in 2021 and I wanted to get into publishing, but as many of you will know, it's extremely competitive. So I joined the Creative Access Mentoring Program, where I was paired up with a mentor, and she already worked in PRH. At this point, I didn't know which department I wanted to work in, so my mentor helped me to figure this out by giving me more specific information on each department, and she also helped connect me with different people in different departments for a chat. When I heard about production, I knew it was what I wanted to do. My mentor also helped me to understand the hiring process a bit better by giving me CV help and interview prep. And after many job applications and interviews, I was finally successful and I started working as a production assistant at the beginning of 2022. So I would really recommend signing up to the program when it comes around, because it gives you a lot more insider knowledge into the publishing industry. So Biblio was used from the very first day of my job and is key to what I do in production. However, in production, we focus more on individual printings of books rather than working on more generic works and editions. So as Patrick kind of demonstrated, we have works, and then you have editions, and then within editions you have impressions. Editions are single print runs of books. So a really popular book like Wimpy Kid might have like hundreds of impressions, whereas a brand new title might only have one impression. So as a controller right now, I'm only working on front list titles, so they're not yet published, and there's only usually one impression set up them. These impressions go in order, so they'll be like 001, and then when we reprint this, they'll be called 002. If you look at the front of a book, like in the inside, you'll see the number and you can tell what kind of impression that it relates to, so it's really handy for us to have. It also helps colleagues, so we can also add roles on Biblio, so I can put on Biblio into the editions. I can have that, I worked on that role as a production controller. All the colleagues can see this, so they can kind of contact me if they need to get in touch with me, but we can also run reports and see all of our titles. So for example, if I'm working on all of the Wimpy Kid titles, I can run a report and kind of see where they all are at right now. So also it helps other people across the company. So if there's somebody in publicity and they're running an event, if they want to know when it's going to be delivering, they can kind of contact me and be like, oh, are you working on this title? When is this going to deliver? So it's really handy to have. Otherwise, in a massive company like ours, it's hard to kind of see where everybody works and what titles people are working on. So on impression level, I can input all the relevant information that I would need to send to the printers so that they can print the book exactly the way that we would like. So literally everything from page extent to the format, it holds every tiny little detail that we need. It makes it easy to tick and untick how we would like the book to be printed. So for example, on the next slide is the specification page of Biblio. This is where we choose what finishes to print with. So we can discuss this with the editors and the designers. And you can see that this particular title prints with foil. So it's the foil blocking is ticked on the front and spine. And I've also left some additional notes. So it says foil, it's got the foil reference, and it says over CMYK and under Matt Lamb. So the printer can see exactly how we want the foil to be printed. So yeah, we discussed this with the editors and designers to kind of make the best decisions about how we want the book to be printed. And then this then feeds through to the printer so they can see how we would like it to be printed. These are the most common finishes that you can see here listed. So we've got like embossing, we've got debossing, we've got foil, gloss, spot, all of these like common finishes. But if there's a finish that's not listed here, then we can just like add it on a miscellaneous finish line. So for example, like right now, sprayed edges are like really, really popular. So we'll just add that on a miscellaneous finish to be like, can you spray this in this certain color? So that's really handy for us to have to communicate to the printers. We also have a paper page, is where we instruct the paper of the specific paper that we would like the printer to use. So the brand, name of the paper, the GSM. This is really important to production. Everybody loves paper in production, so it's really handy for us to have. After we've decided the physical components of a book, we then need to add the costs into Biblio. So the lines that I showed you about the foil and the matte lamb would then have to put in the costs to see like how much this costs and if we can afford it on this particular print run, including freight costs as well. So we need to take everything into consideration. We also need to make sure that these costs are always up to date and correct so that Biblio so that nobody kind of puts in an order with some out-of-date costs. Biblio is great because it allows us to add a validity date. So if the printer has told us, okay, you can use these costs up until the end of the year, we can put that date in. And then when it gets to the end of the year, Biblio will kind of tell us that you can't use these costs anymore, so we can't get caught out. So Biblio is great for that. And then also when the next person comes along, so the next assistant that will then print that book, they'll be able to tell like, oh, I need to get a new quote because this quote has expired. Some of the costs as well, it holds scaled prices, which basically mean these are scales that we've agreed with the printers. So some printers that we have like really strong connections with, we've agreed certain prices with them for certain formats. This is great because I don't even need to go and ask the printer, like, can you give me the costs for reprinting this book? It will already be within Biblio. So we don't need to manually put this in. But however, there are printers that we don't work with very often, so we have to get quotes from them. We have to manually put the costs into Biblio, into a table, and then we can see kind of the margins and how much this is costing us. It also is really cool because it holds exchange rates data. So instead of me having to manually work out an exchange rate, Biblio will do that for me. So if I'm getting a quote in euros, then Biblio will work that out how much that's going to cost me in pounds with the rest of my costs. And this is great because we can add the quotes reference to our costings. So later on, nobody can kind of catch us out to be like, you know, where did you get this quote from? Where did you get the reference from? We've got the reference for it. Okay, so then my next favorite page of Biblio is the schedule page. Patrick, if you go to the next slide, you can see one of the schedules. This is what keeps everything printing on time, kind of keeps us busy, keeps us ticking along, basically. So this is an example of a front list schedule. There's many different templates to choose from depending on lots of different factors. For example, if it's a color or an illustrated book, it'll most likely take a longer schedule because there's so much more work that needs to go into it. Or if it's a mono paperback, then it will have a shorter schedule. So what you can see here is a mono paperback schedule. And as you can see, it starts right from the beginning. We've got copy edited manuscript editorial to production. So that's the first state that editorial will pass over the manuscript to us to then get it typeset. And it goes all the way down to delivery. So as the process goes along, we can tick along, make sure that everything's going correctly. So Biblio will actually auto-populate the dates on the left, if you can see, depending on what template you've picked. So if I've picked a certain template, it will tell me like you need this many days to do the next stage and then this many days to do the next stage. And this is great because you don't have to work it out manually. However, you can change it manually if you've agreed dates with designers and editors to kind of give them a bit more time, which they usually need. So this page is great at holding designers and editors accountable to the dates that they have agreed to. The dates in the left column are the dates that either that auto-populated or that I've inputted myself. And then the dates on the right are the days that actually happened. So as you can see, some of them have run like a couple of days over, and that's just what happens in production. But luckily, we managed to bring it together all in the end, and everything was fine in the end. So after this, you can see the color of the dots. So we've got blue dots, which indicate it's been completed. The black date is indicating something that is not applicable. So for here, it says final marketing end matter. We didn't need that for this particular book, so it was black. And then the last two are orange, which means not started yet, but when it's delivered, I'll mark it blue, and then on our reports, we'll pull through as being completed. It's really handy to have. I learn best with colors. I'm a visual learner, so this is really handy for me to see. And it is actually the most satisfying part of working in production, kind of seeing everything turn blue and completed. It gives you that satisfying feeling of everything's done, your to-do list is finished, job done. Yeah, this is great. And then you can also run reports, as Patrick and Julia were both saying, in production. We'll run reports on all of our titles to see like which ones are a bit delayed or what is the next step required for them. And then we'll hold these meetings with editorial and rights and designers to kind of see whose job is next. Yeah, so after I've inputted all the finishes, the cost, the details, I'll need to run out an estimate to see if like we'll make any profit from this like printing. The estimate will take everything into account. So the finishes cost I was telling you about, the foil, the mat, the lamb, all of those things. And then also our sales estimates. So we load into Biblio like estimates of how many copies we think will sell out of this particular run. So if it's a 1K run, we might think that there's about 700 copies are going to be sold. Things like that. And then also author advances, author royalty rates. We have to take all of these costs into consideration overhead costs, marketing and publicity costs, literally everything. And then we'll run out one big estimate to show you how much profit we're going to make. But also it will show us different scenarios, like the reports that get run out. Like if we're going to print 5K, then it will show us what the margin is going to be. But it will also show you if you wanted to increase that to 6K, you might make a bit more margin. Or if you decrease down to 4K, this is what kind of margin you can make as well. This is really useful for sales and IM, because they can kind of tell, should we increase it, should we decrease it? And these are really interesting conversations that go on. The estimates can also identify where the majority of the costs are coming from. So you can see, is it really expensive because we're having foil on the front cover, or is it because of this really expensive freelance illustrator that we're having work on this title? So it really helps you to analyze, where are these costs coming from? Where could we pull back on these costs, or where could we spend more money particularly from? So yeah, most of these costs are discussed, and then production will add them into the correct place on Biblio. So for a front list title, I would need to send this estimate to finance. They can decide if this book is ready to be approved to print, or perhaps it may need some costs changing depending on the profit margin. For a backlist title, so a title that's already been published but we're reprinting it, I would send this estimate to inventory. They can decide if this printing should go ahead or not. And if it does get improved, then I need to order this printing with the printer. Luckily, Biblio makes this really, really easy for us, because all of that information that I've kind of been telling you about that we've been putting into Biblio generates that all into one handy document. We call that a purchase order. So it will generate a purchase order based on everything that we've put in. And it will basically tell the printer, this is exactly how you need to print this book. The purchase order is in the same format every single time, so it allows our printers to recognize and familiarize themselves, and it makes the process very, very efficient. If there is anything on the PO that they are unsure about, then they can query this via email, but ideally everything will be on the PO already, so they shouldn't need to. And then if they have any comments or things that aren't clear, we can always go back and edit Biblio so that we can make the process better for the next person that reprints this. So yeah, I normally send this to the printer via email, and they should have everything that they need to print the book, except for the actual files containing the content of the book. But that brings me to what Patrick was talking about earlier, DAM, which is the digital asset management. This is where we use DAM. So when we get the files from the designer, we then upload these onto DAM, and then it can hold the correct files for each edition. So they'll give us the cover files, the prelims, the text, all the files, the sales materials. We'll put that all onto DAM into Biblio, and then we can then send this to the printer so they can download the files to then print from. We can also update the files, so if there are any corrections, if somebody spotted a typo, or if it needs updating, if an ad needs updating, we can delete the current files that are already live on Biblio and kind of put newer files on. We can also leave alerts, so it's really handy to communicate with our other colleagues. So if I'm gonna if the next person after me goes to reprint the book, they can see that I've left them alert to say there are new files, please use this for the next impression. That way we don't kind of miss anything, and that it can be quite efficient. So yeah, this is the process of what production use Biblio for. It holds all the information that we could possibly need about our book, and it makes it really easy for us to communicate with the printer as well as other departments. The main thing about Biblio to be this efficient is everybody needs to kind of do their jobs, and everybody in the different departments needs to fill out their relevant sections, and then Biblio works really seamlessly. And it's a joy to work with, I would say. That's me.
Love that, Tanzim. That was like a proper whistle-stop tour of just how it practically gets used, and like what happens if something doesn't get updated. Like it could potentially have really big implications, something getting printed that shouldn't get printed, for example. Absolutely amazing. Thank you all so much. Just a few kind of like practical questions, if I can put those to the group. Do editors use Biblio at all? And
yes,
if so,
yes, they do. Yes. yeah. So they're kind of slightly responsible for some initial information which goes in when they first acquire books, because it's basically editorial that acquire the books. So yes, they do use it, and we find that they are constantly looking at the stock and sale screens, because a lot of the information that feeds there, for example, would feed to the royalties systems for authors. So yes, the answer to that is yes, they do.
Brilliant. And I think somebody asked if you could re-explain the difference between an edition and an impression, if anyone wants to take that one.
Yeah, I can do that. So an edition might be like a hardback or a paperback or an ebook, whereas an impression is within the edition. So of a paperback edition, there will be many different impressions, and the impression is one single print run of a book. So the first print run will be called 001. That will be the first impression. And then the second impression, 6 months down the line, those copies might have sold out. So we'll need to reprint that book, which will cause us to create a second impression. And then we'll just go all the way, we just carry on into the hundreds.
Awesome. And I think you mentioned an abbreviation IM. Is that correct?
IM, yeah.
What does that
Yeah,
mean?
that stands for inventory management.
Industry management.
Inventory management. My team, I'm in inventory management. Yeah.
Brilliant. Oh my goodness. And one thing that lots of folks were asking, and Emily really kindly answered this question, but lots of folks were keen to understand if it's an entry role that they're going for or just their first role in publishing, what's an acceptable level of knowledge to have of Biblio? And I think, Emily, you answered a question that somebody had on that topic and said that in Penguin's particular case, people do get trained up, but would it be useful for someone perhaps to mention that they're aware of Biblio in an interview, or mention it on their CV, or mention that they'd gone to this training? What's everyone's thoughts?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's very useful. It's very useful just to show you have an awareness of publishing systems. So you're obviously absolutely fine to say, I've never used it, or it's not something I've come across in my day-to-day role. We do often get people that have used other systems. So lots of publishers use SAP, and we have other systems that I used. Vista is still used by quite a lot of publishers as well. But I think just an awareness of it, and the fact that you've come to a session like this just shows you're really interested. And I think that's what we're always looking for, is people that love books and have a real passion for it.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think particularly at entry level, we're not expecting that everyone has used Biblio before, but a few people asked, like, how can I talk about this in a cover letter? And I think if you're just mentioning, I came to this session, just try and expand on like what you learned maybe. So if there's a specific skill that's being asked for in the job description, talk about I attended this session and sort of learned about Biblio, how it's used in these areas, and yeah, just kind of showcase some knowledge that you've learned from this. And yeah, Tanzim, I don't know if you want to add to, coming in at an entry level role where you do use Biblio in your previous role at Penguin. How did you find that? Was that something that you were trained up on?
Yeah, it wasn't something that I had previous experience on, so I wouldn't say that that's something that you guys need to worry about. Yeah, coming along to this session and kind of getting the awareness about, because I didn't know about Biblio when I got the job. But yeah, it's used from day one, but not in a way that you're expected to know everything. Like your line manager will show you every single module that there is to learn about Biblio with time.
Yeah, and like I say, actually, out of all the systems when I first started compared to now, like of all the systems we've ever used, the first system I was trained on, I just wanted to go home and cry. But actually, Biblio just isn't like that, because it's just all so self-explanatory, lots of it. And even though it will seem like there's an awful lot that you would need to learn, it's amazing how user-friendly it is and how quickly you would then pick those tools up now compared to many, many years ago.
And funnily enough, I was running Biblio training earlier this morning. So we had some new joiners that have joined in the past, at the beginning of this week, actually. And I was running Biblio training for them. Some of them had more knowledge than others. Some had never touched it before. But yeah, I would reiterate what everyone has said. You mentioned that you've been on this session, you have an awareness of it, and it helps. It really will help going forward.
Fantastic. And I guess like a lot of people, I know that we focused on Biblio specifically as a topic, but a lot of folks will just be wanting to know and understand if they're at that slightly elevated level where they have maybe one bit of work experience under their belt, or they've done some work experience in publishing, Is there anything else that you would say, like once people have like a base level knowledge of Biblio, are there really good questions to ask about it, or should you just be curious about it, or what would you say for those who are just a little bit further along the journey?
I would say that some of the questions coming up in the Q&A that we've sort of answered are all the right sorts of questions to be asking. So, you know, how would a specific role use it? Each role that you apply to within publishing is going to have a different use of Biblio. So yeah, that would be my advice, but I will pass on probably to someone else.
Fantastic. We've covered so much today, and I hope that everyone who's joined this session is leaving with a little bit more insight and information versus when they joined. What I'll leave you all with is please look out on your emails, because there'll be a follow-up email from the Creative Access team just pointing you towards relevant content that you can be reading, any other offers, but also most importantly a feedback form. That's the most valuable thing for us, is understanding, has this session been useful for you, and are there other topics that you would want to hear more about in the future? We'd love to run more sessions with Penguin Random House and give you guys all the insights that we possibly can that are going to be really useful to arm you for your careers and heading into interviews and shining up your CV and things like that. So please do take a moment to provide some feedback on those feedback forms when they come through. I'll also just share with everyone now some links to all of our relevant channels in case you aren't already following us or you're not already registered with us. The first one is how you can get yourself registered with us. That means that you don't miss opportunities. You'll get to see highlights of them each week. And then here are all of our social channels. So if you're not already connected to us and following, then please do make sure that you are. There were lots of questions around how you can get access to mentorships, like the one that Tanzim mentioned. And that was answered in the Q&A portion. But just to re-clarify that the majority of mentoring opportunities, specifically within publishing or within other industries, most individuals will gain access to those by being placed into a role by Creative Access. But we do also open up mentoring opportunities throughout the year. So as long as you're following us and you're connected to us, you'll never miss when those do launch. And we'll hopefully be launching some more into next year. So keep your eyes peeled. But just a final big thank you to each of our panelists, Patrick, Tanzim, Julia, Emily. Thank you so much for joining us and helping us to make this session happen for Work in Publishing Week. Best of luck, everyone, whichever stage that you're at. And stay tuned to our social channels and Penguin Random House's social channels, because there's lots of other insights and tips dropping for this Work in Publishing Week from now onwards. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining, and keep an eye on your emails. But yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.